The way people look at church is different. And we have different needs. We are different here. Only God knows what's beyond the skin of my forehead or yours, or what's in your heart. Only God knows what's there. One thing that brings us together is the Bible, and the purpose of understanding the thoughts of God. As we come to worship God, we, in a sense, specifically on the Sabbath, we want to leave aside the cares of the week, the busyness of the week, and we try to completely disconnect ourselves from, from everything that stresses out or bothers us, and again, turn ourselves to God and to understand the thoughts of God. And one way to do that, definitely, is through the reading of the Bible. We continue actually today with a series in our studies called The Parables of the End Time. This is the second part. It's part 2. And for those who have not been here today, the main passage that led to this study is found in Luke chapter 17, 26 to 32, and I'm going to read it again. Reading from the Bible, it's the New King Translation. These are the words of Christ. As it was in the days of Noah, so it will be in the days of the Son of Man, meaning the second coming of Christ. They ate, they drank, they married wives. They were given in marriage until the day that Noah entered the ark, and the flood came and destroyed them all. Likewise, as it was in the days of Lot, they ate, they drank, they bought, they sold, they planted, they built. But on the day that Lot went out of Sodom, it rained fire and brimstone from heaven and destroyed them all. Even so will be in the day when the Son of Man is revealed. So, as we see, Jesus Christ uses two historical events in order to explain to us what would be in the days of his coming. Jesus uses the two historical events. What are the events? The days of Noah and the days of Lot. So we begin thus the series called Parables of the End Time, the days of Noah, then the days of Lot, the last days in Jerusalem, described in Matthew 24 as being another example of how and what are the settings before the second coming of Christ. And then 3 parables in Matthew 25, the parable of the 10 virgins, the talents, and the sheep or the goats, with lessons of how can we prepare for the second coming of Christ. So the series has actually 6 parts. If you missed them, you might try them online if you're interested in seeing the whole series. Today we review the previous session, just because obviously not everybody has been here. So I'm going to have a quick review of the previous session. We begin looking at the story of Noah and the flood, asking the question, is it true or was it true? We believe that Genesis chapter 6, 7, and 8 that describes the story of the flood is not a legend, is not a myth. We believe it's a historical reality, and we take it as is written, as a literal historical record. Not everybody believes that. But as far as I am concerned, as far as I shall assume you might be concerned, and as far as the Seventh-day Adventist Church in general, we believe that as being a biblical historical event. We looked in reading that passage into the first verses that speaks about the sons of God. And at that time, we, if you remember, some of you, we spoke about the fact that the sons of God were actually God's children in that generation. But at one point, they begin to lose that spiritual identity. They lost their connection with God, and their light began to diminish. And unfortunately, in the days of Noah, the true worshipers of God, they were not that many in number. And then that loss of spiritual identity I believe the loss of the spiritual identity of God's children led to the generation of flood. Because when the light diminishes, what comes? Darkness. And Jesus uses also the salt example, and he says, when the salt loses its taste. You remember that? When the salt loses its property, what happens with the environment? It spoils. Right? Because salt has the properties of preserving. When the salt loses the quality, the environment gets to spoil and becomes stinky. And you understand me, speaking about the spiritual aspect. Sin becomes prevalent. So the process begins with the loss of the spiritual identity of God's children, the compromising. Then we mentioned that when the giants ruled the world, we mentioned that the generation of Noah was actually a generation of people highly sophisticated, technically advanced, most probably. They used all kinds of sources of energy. There is a source of energy, an amazing free source of energy available to everybody, which we don't use. I have it in my mind. I don't know if anybody can read my mind. Can you guess what source of energy is that? Well, solar, it's true. We use it to a certain degree. We use wind. There is another source of energy. We do not use it. It's available everywhere. It's amazing. It's very powerful. What is it? It's magnetism. Magnetism, yes. We don't use it. Anyway, I had some people, they showed me once a device. They thought of converting magnetism in electrical energy. And they thought that they invented, which is called a machine that propels itself. If anybody is interested in that conversation, we can talk about that. I was very interested. If you find, by the way, if you discover something and you want to share that invention of yours with me, I don't mind that. Yeah. So, but the point being is that the civilization before the flood, probably people who were highly sophisticated, highly intelligent. What was the average age for the population before the flood? Yeah, 800, 900 years. Can you imagine the memory, the capacity they had, the processing ability? So we don't know much about them. Nothing has been left of them other than the oil. Nothing has been left other than, we don't know anything about them. But definitely the giants ruled the world. The Bible speaks about the giants. And I think we live in similar times today. And I showed last time that graph done by someone at MIT. You know, it's one of the best technology research, study institutes today. It's on the East Coast. And the guy in this documentary called The Age of AI, Artificial Intelligence, he made an interesting observation. For hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, the development of the human society was almost the same. Things did not change until we came into the 1800s. The 1800s, it's a different time in human history. The last 200 years, as you see this graph where it shows the line of scientific discoveries and evolution in terms of understanding things, dramatically changed in the world. We live today in the worlds of the giants. The abilities what people are able to do today, for me, is just amazing. It's just amazing. 10 years ago, the cell phones were just coming. 10 years? The smartphones, as we call them. You keep a computer in your pocket today, and you have more information there than you can have in, the books are becoming obsolete. Nobody buys books. I remember the days when I remember maybe 20, 30 years ago, I saw the Britannica Encyclopedia. I don't know if you remember. And I said, I will never have the money to buy it. I said to myself, I will never have the chance to have it. The day it's in my pocket. Right? And if someone wants to give it to me for free, I said, thank you, I don't need it. And that's in the last 30 years. So we live in very unique times. If someone tells you, things has been always the same, tell them that is not the case. That is not the case. And This is not the time to get into more details, but one of the Bible parallels between the days of Noah and our days is that society has reached high levels of development as never before in the world. Moving on, let's see, I have to find the right spot for this. We are not that technologically advanced with so, I mean, no offense to the technical guys. You guys do an amazing job. Thank you. There is one section, the Noah's story, the Noah's record, it's in chapter 6, 7, and 8. And basically it's divided in 3 sections. The first one describes the conditions of the flood. The second one describes Noah and his life. And the third section describes the flood itself. For the purpose of the study today, we look at the first and the second section. The last part, or almost the last part, is we read the biblical record in Genesis chapter 6. There is an interesting observation the Bible makes. People were not only very smart, but very evil, unfortunately. And the Bible says, then the Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intent of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. The earth was corrupted before God, and the earth was filled with violence. And God looked upon the earth, and behold, it was corrupt, for all the flesh has corrupted his way upon the earth. How many times the word corrupt comes in the passage? How many times? 3 times. The word's corrupt. Do you remember in computer technology we use the word corrupted files? The files that have been corrupted, the computer doesn't work right. And some of the computers and some of the files can be that corrupted that it's almost impossible to repair the computer, right? I mean, some of you guys are trained in this field, you know a lot about it, but I've heard that sometimes the brain of the computer can be so corrupted that there is nothing, the viruses and the Trojan horses and all this malware got into the computer, corrupted the files, destroyed the files to such a degree that you can't restore the thing. And it's all about information. All these viruses and everything we talk about, it's information, right? Well, the human brain works in the same way. Can the human brain be so corrupted that at one point it's almost irreversible? Can the human mind get so corrupted that it's almost impossible to restore it to a normal functioning? So, in the days, and the word corruption in this passage means actually, it has the connotation of sexual immorality. And the next thing you see, the Bible mentions violence, violence, and violence. So the generation of flood was characterized by 2 things: sexual immorality and violence. Can you tell me what are the themes of most of the movies today? The 2 things. If you do not have sexual immorality and violence in a movie, that movie becomes a documentary. Right? And do you know the story of Dr. Ben Carson? Some of you have story of him. The boy that grew up in Detroit, and he became, where is my friend today? There was a young man today. I think he left the church. Oh, that's so sad. Because I met him in the parking lot. He picked a little bit of a rock, a black shiny rock, and he showed me to me, and he said, this is obsidian. But he left, he's not here. I'm so sorry, because I wanted to give him as a positive example. Anyway, now I can't. And anyway, the story goes that they wanted to make a movie about Dr. Ben Carson and his life. And he talked to the producers. I saw the movie. The movie is called Gifted Hands. If you haven't seen the movie, I can recommend the movie. And in the movie, there is a guy, as I understand, he's a famous actor. Can anybody tell me? Yes. Cooper Gooding? Cuba. All right. So, Anyway, the guy plays in the movie and so on and so forth, but the movie is not that exceptional. And a movie company asked Dr. Ben Carson, he was negotiated with a bigger company to do the movie, and they told Dr. Ben Carson, and they said, your movie is kind of flat. You have to put some salt and pepper in the movie. He said, put there in the movie that you had an affair with one of your assistants and stuff like this. And he said, no, I can't do that. No, you have to put that. If you want the movie to sell, if you want the people to see the movie, you have to put that in the movie. I said, no, I can't put that in the movie because that's not my life. That doesn't reflect my life. I says, well, if you don't put that in the movie, we are not going to do the movie for you. And they did not. So he had to find another company, which is so the movie. Very interesting. The point is, the world was corrupted and violent in the days of Noah. So is today. Talking about the breaking news, I don't want to spend too much time in this. You can't see any news without acts of violence, of someone getting into a school or into a place and shooting people and killing people into Walmart. Even in common places like Walmarts and schools. And speak about, we get used to, the war in Ukraine doesn't shock us anymore, right? We've seen it. It's over a year now, so we got used to it. But people are dying there. People are still killing each other at a global scale. And now the conversation is about this nuclear war, right? And the United States seems to be entangled in, with Russia and with China now. And you start wondering what's happening. So we definitely, I believe, we live in interesting times. And speaking about violence at the individual or global scale, and then I'm trying to, by the way, who knows the picture? Do you know this lady? You don't know her? You know her? Can anybody tell me her name? Beyonce, right? Beyonce. Well, Beyonce is a math teacher. She's known in the world for developing some math theorems to help with discovery and curing cancer. Is that right? No, of course not. She's in the entertainment industry. Of course, she's not in the math things. She's in the entertainment industry, and it's amazing that we know of her. And you wonder, how do we know about her? And the last thing, she went in Dubai, and she put together a concert, and I think the profits of that concert are about $25 million. The question I have, how is it that some of the most famous people in the world are people in the entertainment, sports and entertainment? How is it that these are some of the wealthiest and most known people in the world? Why is that? Why is it? Who pays them? Who pays them? We, the people. So they get rich and wealthy and famous because the people like what they sell. Now you tell me, what do they sell? What do they sell? Corruption and violence. That's what they sell. I was looking for a decent picture. I didn't want to put some of the pictures that I found online. I want to, out of respect for yourself and for myself, I didn't want to put. But they are selling in today's age corruption and violence, and people are buying it. Right? So, the days of Noah and today are very close. And it seems as the Bible speaks about the cup of iniquity. Do you remember that expression in the Bible, the cup of iniquity? It's filling up, it's filling up, it's filling up, it's filling up, and it comes to a point where God is going to say, enough, it's enough. Again, it's unfortunately through media, I think even our homes are invaded, and it seems almost very difficult to handle. If you want to keep, I'm looking at young parents having to raise children in an age of violence and corruption. And I'm saying you have a very difficult task. And it is very difficult. I remember some of my days with our son. They come to a point where you have no control over what they do. But even when you do, when they come to the age where you try to limit the influences from the outside corrupted and violent world, and it's very difficult. It is very difficult. And Satan does that very well, and he's very intentional about corrupting the minds of the parents and the children at the same time. The Bible says, Ephesians 5, 8 to 11. Sometime I want your cooperation. Would anybody read this passage from the Bible? Brother Bill.
For you were once darkness, but now you are light in the world. Walk as children of light. For the fruit of the Spirit is in all goodness and righteousness and truth, finding out what is acceptable to the Lord, and have no fellowship with the unfruitful works of darkness, but rather expose them.
As children of God and as children of light, the Bible says we should have no fellowship with them. And it doesn't mean the people, in a sense, reaching out to individual is not about becoming a very exclusive group of people. It's not about that in a direct sense. But have no fellowship with the unfruitful works of darkness, but rather expose them. Christianity is not immune to temptations. Christians are not immune to temptations. We are tempted. But by God's grace, should be faithful, and we can be faithful to God. The next section in the Bible speaks about the man Noah. And it's a wonderful description of this man. And the Bible says, and the Lord was sorry. Oh, I'm sorry.